We wouldn't know when something began if it didn't end. We wouldn't know if something changed if it never did. And that's what's so hard sometimes, especially when we don't want it to change or end, but sometimes we're not the ones making that decision. And this gives me a real opportunity to appreciate when something is going well or going my way, or I'm enjoying a certain aspect of life. And if it does end up changing, I'm able to have a greater sense of appreciation, often with hindsight, and it reinforces that idea of contrast. Hello and welcome to the podcast, to another episode of Queerly Overthinking. I'm your host, Adam Harper, and in today's episode, I'm opening up a bit more in regards to my childhood, my hometown, and my home specifically. And I'm opening up about this because there's a lot of feelings I have right now about leaving a lot of it behind, saying my goodbyes and working through the feelings of nostalgia. There's a lot to unpack this episode, so grab something to sip on and settle in. Well, howdy, y'all. I am very excited to be here with you today. And oh, goodness, I am been really overthinking this episode a little bit. But I realized that this was something that had been on my mind for a long time. And I just knew that I needed to talk about it. Like the minute that I realized it had just been circulating in my brain for so long, I was like, I have to get this out on paper into the podcast. So yeah, I'm ready to talk about it. As mentioned in the intro, this episode is being prompted by something that's happening in my personal life specifically. My parents recently decided to move not only out of the house that I've ever known growing up, but also out of my hometown. And I'll get into this a little bit further in the episode, but I felt like it would be helpful to know what is causing me to feel so nostalgically focused today. I'm going to break this podcast out into 3 specific segments. The first focusing on the initial reaction to my parents' decision to leave. The second segment is going to be focused on, processing that farewell, that kind of bittersweet farewell to past things in our lives, whether it be a place, a person, a feeling, anything. And the third segment is going to be focused on embracing the unknown, embracing change. Something I am still working on myself, if I'm being completely honest. Starting with that first segment, I want to start with these first initial questions of, did I consider my childhood home a constant, a source of stability as I was growing up? And how did it shape my sense of place and belonging? And I want to say, in a way, yes, my family never moved when I was growing up. The house that I grew up in was all I ever knew. All throughout grade school and even into college, there was always a sense of constant just knowing, oh, that's home, and that's always been home. My parents have expanded on the house as well over the years. It's a fairly large home, which meant so many different places as a kid that I could just explore or hang out and do my own thing if I wanted, which was a rare thing to have alone time considering I grew up with 7 siblings. Even the roads and the turn-by-turn directions to get to my childhood home are ingrained in me. I know it like the back of my hand. And funny enough, I could likely navigate my hometown and neighborhood without my phone telling me where to go. I would venture to guess most folks who have a similar small town background could say the same. Heck, you won't catch me though, not using navigation in Dallas. The roads here are like spaghetti noodles. Now, as an adult, what was my initial reaction to my parents' decision to relocate? Honestly, I was a little shocked. I remember going home for Christmas and being told the news that the decision was made and that plans were underway for them to relocate. And it really didn't hit me at first, but I'll get into that in a second. Initially, I just thought, why? They'd been there for so long. And I guess I just assumed they would be there forever, It was such a new concept and a new idea that had not yet crossed my mind as a possibility. And as I said before, I always thought, that's home. That's always been home. Now fast forward to the next Christmas, I went home to visit, and That Christmas, that was really hard. That was probably the hardest I've cried in a long time, if I'm being completely transparent with you. It was just so vivid, all of these emotions passing through me, so raw as I reflected on so many memories, both the good and the bad. Reflecting on the changes to the house over time, changes to the neighborhood, but yet always that same familiarity. You know, the grieving process kind of sucks sometimes, not gonna lie. It's not linear, as I'm sure many of us are familiar with. Even as I was writing this outline and these thoughts, I just kept pausing, looking out the window of my now apartment, and a random memory from my childhood will just flash before my mind. And I have to fight back some tears if I'm being honest. Shifting gears a little bit, segment one was a little bit shorter. It's probably the shorter one out of the three. Segment two is really exploring the concept of what home is, whether it's an emotional or physical space. So let's explore this concept of home. And I want to pose this question of, can a physical location truly define home, or is it something deeper, a feeling you carry with you? Honestly, what a great question, you know? I'm so curious to know what the concept of home means to you. So definitely drop a comment in today's social post and let me know. But I would love to really know what all these different perspectives could be of what home means to you. I would say that while a structure can definitely have defining aspects of what makes a house a home, I think I really lean on location, more so the surrounding land and even the town that you're in. Thinking back on that very tearful Christmas when I was saying goodbye to the house and feeling so many feelings, I had the idea to make a little keepsake jar of all these different items around the house. I put some leaves from the trees, some sand and dirt from the backyard, a few desert rocks, and even a couple dried up seed pods from the yucca plants. Funny enough, when I had shared with my therapist that I had done this, he said it was interesting that all of the items I had collected were more about the surrounding land and plants and space than anything from the actual structure of the house. Thinking though about something deeper, such as an emotion or a feeling you carry with you, while my perception and location of where my now quote unquote home is, I don't know actually. This is something that's really making me think a little bit. Home as an emotion to me is warmth. It's cozy, it's familiar, it's tailored. It's not always perfect, mind you, especially in apartment living with noisy neighbors or being limited sometimes on how much you can customize your space, but it's just got that charm, that je ne sais quoi to it. You know what I mean? I distinctly remember when I was looking for a new apartment when my lease was ending in Denton, and I remembered the first place that I looked and toured, and it just felt right. And I felt so incredibly lucky. It felt like where I needed to be, and that all the hard work that I was putting into finding my next home was about to pay off. Side note, as much as I do love my apartment and worked my butt off to get here and to customize it and to make it a home for myself, I'm excited to share that I'm slowly yet surely considering what it would take to purchase my first home or property. It's a lot of adulting, a lot of thinking to do, and from what I've been told, a lot of paperwork to sign. So we'll be crossing that bridge when we get to it. Beyond the physical space, though, what are some things that I might miss from my childhood home or perhaps the town that I grew up in? Thinking specifically about my childhood home, every time that I've visited since moving out, it's crazy to see how much smaller everything has gotten as I've grown into my stature. I miss how big it felt. I miss all the little places around the house that I could hide and seek or find a quiet space to just be with my thoughts. The last thing I'll share about what I miss about my childhood home is more so the land, as I mentioned before, but if we actually think about the structure of the house, I do feel like there are spaces and memories tied to those spaces, like the fireplace hearth, where as a little kid, I would do performances for my family to records that we had at the time, or just sitting at our self playing piano. It was one of those old fashioned ones where you would have to put in a scroll of paper that had a bunch of holes in it. And as air would blow through those holes, it would play the keys on the piano. It was just so much fun, and I just remember a lot of the days of my childhood being filled with song and singing along. And I did take piano lessons for a while, and I can still occasionally, understand and read some sheet music and just have a deeper appreciation for songs and composition. And I just feel like I have a really wide taste in music, even though I will say, yes, my Spotify will completely read me and say otherwise, that I do listen to a lot of pop music. But I absolutely love listening to classical piano or jazz and just going to even like musical concerts, whether it's a performer or an orchestra. And I just feel like from a very young age, I just love music and really attribute that to having a piano in the home as one of the many focal points. Side note, as I was writing up this outline and sipping on a boba tea and just finished a great book, Natasha Bedingfield's song Unwritten was playing on the radio. And I just have to say, this song always comes on as a reminder to me that today is a new day. Each page I write is a blank, fresh start, and that I'm going to be okay, that you are going to be okay, that we are going to be okay. A lot is happening in life, and even just thinking about all of it can be a little overwhelming. It's a lot of change happening all at once, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but change isn't always fun, but I feel like it's necessary. And I just try to go with the flow as much as I can. Some days are definitely easier than others, but this song always gives me some hope. Thinking about my hometown and aspects of it that I'll miss, or just, miss now as an adult, but it's nice that I still have the ability to go back and visit when I want. I guess I miss the sense of community. I miss the friend groups that I used to have, and a lot of them were, from the church, but also from school. I've talked about this in previous episodes, but you really do have a sense of belonging and camaraderie when you're in an institution, whether that's grade school, college, or a belief system. And I kind of miss that, if I'm being honest. My grade school years were from the early to late 2000s, and even looking back, it just feels like school years were simpler days. Overall, I really just love the charm that New Mexico has and that my small hometown has. And it's actually grown a lot, I will say. And I do love being able to visit from time to time. But for me, I really needed to live someplace that was a little larger. And while Albuquerque is a well-sized metroplex of towns and communities, I just knew that I needed to be someplace a little bit bigger for my taste. And I guess everything's bigger in Texas. Last thing I'll say about what I miss is the mountains. Every time that I go back, I am absolutely reminded that New Mexico is home and these mountains aren't going anywhere. And I just love to take in the scenery. The sunsets are unreal. And it's just so crazy because, I love the Texas sunrises and sunsets, but they're, if I'm being truthful, no comparison to a New Mexico sunset, in my opinion. Again, thinking about my parents' move, this move seems to be prompting a lot of reflections on impermanence. And it got me thinking, how do I typically grapple with the idea of endings and change? Well, from the get-go, I will tell you that I do not like change. I just don't. I wish there were some things in life that just did not change, but I've come to accept that change is inevitable. And I'm just grateful that sometimes as change happens, it kind of shuffles around at different periods of our life for different things, which allows me the time to potentially shift along with it through different processes and routines and perspectives as change evolves my life and the lives around me. There are just some things where I've come to realize that no matter what you want or wish could happen, it's just not how it's going to play out for you. And you have to, on some level, accept that. And it's difficult, but I'm really grateful that I've been able to see growth in myself and recognizing that, and also recognizing that nothing is going to be the way that it always is, if that makes sense. We wouldn't know when something began if it didn't end. We wouldn't know if something changed if it never did. And that's what's so hard sometimes, especially when we don't want it to change or end, but sometimes we're not the ones making that decision. And this gives me a real opportunity to appreciate when something is going well or going my way, or I'm enjoying a certain aspect of life. And if it does end up changing, I'm able to have a greater sense of appreciation, often with hindsight, and it reinforces that idea of contrast. Okay, y'all. Let's get into this third segment here, shall we? Despite the sadness, are there any positive aspects to my parents' move and the potential changes it brings for me? There is a sense of closure that comes to the move, and really it's a big closure in my opinion because my parents have been there for decades and it just feels like a very long chapter, let alone maybe a book, is closing, and in a way that is exciting. Especially as somebody who's really getting back into reading more, it's always, kind of bittersweet to finish a book, but then also exciting to end it so that way you can start another book. As mentioned before, there are some things that change and end without us necessarily being able to make that decision, and it just happens, and you just get to see where things go in your life after that. And to me, it feels like this is an ending and also a beginning. And I think that's just so exciting that there is always like another hello anytime that there's a goodbye. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that happens all the time, but I'm saying a lot of the time that there is a hello around the corner waiting for us. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to mention about this, but it just feels like moving forward. It feels like letting go. It feels like I'm embracing what's next in my life. And what's so crazy is that it's not even my house. It's not even my move. It's my parents' move. It's their journey. And in a way, I still feel somewhat connected, obviously, with like my emotions, my feelings, because obviously I grew up there. But I'm just so excited for this change, even though it is so difficult. It is so emotional. It is so bittersweet, as mentioned. And it's just, I'm just trying to remind myself some change is necessary. Looking ahead though, how can I maintain a sense of connection to my childhood and the memories associated with my old home? This question is so hard to answer because now I'm faced with an idea that many people might have of, do you ever drive by your old childhood home? And I feel like right now, I don't want to right now. And that's okay if I don't want to. I think it's because I need to let go. I need to move forward in my life and with my memories of this space. And if someone buys the house and moves in, whether or not they decide to take care of it, improve upon it, or if they don't take care of it or improve it and it just goes downhill, I just feel like that's their chapter of their life now. And that's their space to take care of now. Because for me, for every move that I've made, it's, that is my space to take care of, whether it's, an apartment or any space that I've ever occupied. I think one thing that'll really help me keep connected is the memories and the photographs. And anytime that I visit New Mexico, it'll remind me of the good parts of my childhood and upbringing and remind me that this is my life now. And this is where I'm at now as my adult version of myself. And that concept of I am the adult version of who my childhood version needed. And that is huge. Oh my gosh. When I learned this concept and I realized that I have been striving to be the person that I felt like I needed growing up as a kid, mind blown. I feel like that's what I want to focus on right now. Respecting my past by moving forward with the present and my future. This episode has been a journey through nostalgias and goodbyes, but a message of hope and resilience that I would love to share with y'all is, maybe the biggest thing I can say is just be kind to yourself, because this is not an easy thing to go through. Sometimes, whether it's saying goodbye to a childhood home, whether you're the one saying goodbye to something else, or whether there's something in your life that's changing, it's not just it's not easy, you know? And I think that's the biggest thing to recognize is that sometimes life, we have these pillars in our lives and, whether it's home life and stability or work or relationships, there's just so many different pillars. Sometimes there can just be a lot of change that could be happening for us all at once. And it's important to be kind to yourself. And it's really easy to forget that. There are some days, if I'm feeling extremely stressed out about something, that I'll start to go down a research rabbit hole. And I know I've been saying rabbit hole a lot in a lot of episodes. Maybe it's just the theme of being a queerly overthinker. But what I can say about this is that when I go down a research conundrum, I have to have all the answers. I have to try to figure all this out. I have to know exactly how certain I want to be, have it all ready to go. And I'm starting to see now these little signals pop up as I've been working on myself, going to therapy, learning how to soothe my anxiety, that I need to take a step back and not be so concerned about the past or the future. And I just need to choose to be present and choose to focus on what is right in front of me. And I've talked about this before as well, but meditation is huge. Absolutely huge. It has been so helpful for me in so many ways where my mind has just been racing and I just feel like there's so many decisions that need to be made or research that needs to be done in order to help me make decisions, or I'm feeling extremely nostalgic and feeling some type of way in my emotions, and all of these just are bubbling up together. And even just thinking, if I'd done XYZ, or if this has been done in a certain way, just meditation, even just for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes of your day, it makes a huge difference. I'm able to just sit with myself, not move, and just listen to my body and breathe. This is not necessarily a plug because I'm not sponsored, but I've definitely been loving the Apple Fitness meditations. They're guided meditations, and you could find guided meditations anywhere. I just find those specifically to be helpful because I'm able to have something that's curated to walk me through a practice, but even just sitting and breathing, that has also been really beneficial. So give it a shot and let me know what you think. Today's quote comes from James Baldwin. He said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." Well, thanks y'all for joining me today on this journey of change. It has been so therapeutic and so cathartic to be able to just share my thoughts with you and to just get all this out. I've been, as I've mentioned, overthinking it quite a bit. Change can be tough. It can be so hard, but yet it is such an opportunity for growth. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on change, goodbyes, nostalgia, and just this ever-evolving nature of life in today's social posts. But with that said, have a beautiful start to your weekend, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Queerly Overthinking is hosted, edited, and executive produced by Adam Harper, with additional producing by Cass Cooper. You can follow Queerly Overthinking on Instagram or TikTok at Queerly Overthinking, and you can find more at www.queerlyoverthinking.com.